Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Looking for a home that keeps you connected to Silicon Valley without the usual barriers to entry? The Gates in Morgan Hill by City Ventures is a walkable neighborhood near downtown restaurants, outdoor trails, and an easy commute to the Bay Area. It's a small town setting with access to major career hubs. Every home is all electric with buyer-owned solar included. With limited availability, now's the time to take a closer look. Discover your new home at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
Some of the most damaging relationships are the hardest ones to explain, and they don't have to look extreme in order to be deeply harmful. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast, where we make sense of what never quite made sense. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin moving forward. You need a coach. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. I am excited to share this episode with you. I am doing a podcast swap with Dr. Kerry McAvoy, host of Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. If you don't know Kerry yet, she's a retired psychologist and author who has spent her career helping people understand and deconstruct narcissism so they can build genuinely healthy relationships. She's someone I respect deeply, and I wanted to share her work with you directly. In this episode, Kerry sits down with Don Hennessy, an Irish psychotherapist who has spent decades working directly with abusive men and their partners. And I want you to really sit with that for a second, because that perspective is rare. Most of us in this space hear from survivors, but Don has spent his career inside the mind of the abuser. This conversation is called "You've Been Made to Think It's Your Fault: The Truth About Predatory Behavior." And it does exactly what the title says. Don and Kerry break down the hidden playbook that predatory men use to infiltrate your mind, often quietly and so gradually that you don't even realize it's happening until you're already in it. They get into what these men are actually after and why so many of us never see it coming. If you've ever asked yourself, how did I not notice the signs? This episode is going to answer that question in a way that might genuinely shift how you see your own story. So take a listen, and when you're done, go check out Kerry's show, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. Here's the conversation with Don Hennessy.
The older I get, the more I realize that all the other behaviors, all the things that are written, all that stuff is just a smokescreen. What they're really about is sexual dominance in the relationship. And all their other behaviors is just to lead you astray or to get women to think differently. Within a half hour of meeting somebody, they would assess whether they were kind or not. So if you were a bitch, which is what we call them here, ladies who only thought about themselves or who were high maintenance, they would touch you. So you had to be kind. And the second most important thing is you had to be truthful. Their approach was like treating a cancer. So if you had a stomach cancer, you'd have pain and you'd have bleeding and you'd have all sorts of digestive systems. And what they were doing was actually treating the impacts and the effects. So they were covering up the blood and reducing the pain and all of that. But nobody was examining the tumor. In Ireland, there were about 25% of relationships are abusive. Could be even higher, but there are definitely 25%. And it has nothing to do with the women. But that's how clever men are. That's how devious these guys are. They put all the responsibility back on the women.
What motivates abusive men to be exploitative? To answer that question, Don Hennessy, the author of How He Gets Into Her Head, joins me today to talk about the inside of a manipulative or exploitative relationship. So, Don Hennessy, it has been a really privilege to be here with you today. I have very much looked forward to this interview because I've been a longtime fan of yours. So why don't you tell those who are not familiar with yourself who you are and how you got interested in the realm of domestic abuse?
Well, actually, for about the first 20 years of my career, I didn't do anything about abuse. I actually worked in a different profession altogether. And when I was in my mid 40s, I had a sort of I suppose I had a sort of recognition that maybe I could use my life to do something better than what I was doing. So I began to study relationship counseling, and I got myself a job with a centre. It was in Cork, and I worked as a relationship counsellor. And within a week of joining the team in there, I was invited by my director, who was a clinical psychologist who had trained in Chicago. But he said, we seem to be getting a lot of abusive men and couples who have difficulties with domestic violence in the center. So we decided that we would study the issue. And for about 2 years, without engaging with anybody in the field, we studied it for our own sakes and also to decide whether, as a center, it was appropriate for us to get involved even. So, having made the decision that we would set up a project, we developed what was known as the Cork Marriage Counselling Domestic Violence Project. It's a long title. And we began to work in the area. And a team of six of us originally, there was 3 men and 3 women. We decided to run a group for men and a group for their partners independently. And what we discovered initially was we were the only people in the world doing this. Most of the other groups who were working either with the men or with the women were working separately. And in some agencies, they had an overarching director or something, but the team weren't engaging on both sides of the issue. So that's what we did. We worked for about 5 or 6 years in believing that we, as very clever Irishmen, could persuade other Irishmen to behave properly and teach them things they didn't know about how to behave properly. And then for about 3 years, having listened to their partners over those 5 or 6 years and realizing that what we were doing was quite dangerous, we decided on a slightly different tactic in that we would bring the men in to the groups, but rather than we try to educate them, we invited them to educate us. And we didn't tell them that's what they were doing. We still told them they were getting treatment and getting all sorts of guidance and all of that. Or we actually listened to them and we documented all their sessions. We recorded everything and we analyzed it subsequently. And it was because both myself and one of my directors had been working also with what we call pedophiles. We were a church-based organization here in Ireland, and there were a huge amount of pedophilia going on in the church, and it began to become exposed. And so we had plenty of clients in that area. So we went to a conference in Birmingham in the UK where they ran a treatment center for pedophile men. And it was in that conference where we got the language to describe the pattern of how these pedophiles operated. And when we came back to Ireland, we began to realize that the guys we were working with were following the same pattern. And we began to explore that and confirm it. So it came from probably an unusual source in that we knew it about other men, but we didn't have any idea how these men operated until we began to analyze them. And as we analyzed them, we realized they're behaving in exactly the same way. We also went to the women who were attending our groups at the time, and we ran questionnaires past them, and we asked them to try and see how they would describe what actually happened to them. And what was really scary at the time was none of the ladies actually knew what had happened to them. They had no idea how they ended up in an abusive relationship. They kept on saying, I must be very stupid, I must be very naive. If it had happened more than once to them, it must be written all over my face that I'm a sucker for these kind of men or whatever. So they kept on internalizing the responsibility. And when we began to look at that, we said, no, that's not what's happening. We suddenly began to realize that the men were doing something which we couldn't quite define. So we spent about 3 years exploring what the men were doing and trying to have a language to describe it, and realizing that their operation was very covert, and the women who were the target of that operation were not able to define it or describe it.
Mm.
So that's where we got our ideas from. That's why we began to think, oh, hold on a second, there's something we don't know or something we're not able to see. And as we revealed that, we found the pattern, we found how they were operating. And I have to admit that when I started finding this, I said, oh my God, I'm going to get 5 or 6 or 7 books out of this now. It'll be great for my career and all of that. And then we began to realize all the guys do exactly the same thing. There was only one book in them, really. So we began to define it. And eventually, 4 or 5 years later, I wrote the book. But we had spent a number of years touring Ireland, going around to various centres and expressing our opinions. What was really fascinating was that on platforms, the people who attacked me most were women. They said, why the hell are you telling us what we know already? We know what's going on. We know how women are suffering. We know what they're putting up with. And we don't need men to tell us uh, why they're suffering or what's going on for them. Or we don't certainly want to waste time thinking about the men. But I began to say that their approach was like treating a cancer. So if you had a stomach cancer, you'd have pain and you'd have bleeding and you'd have all sorts of digestive systems. And what they were doing was actually treating the impacts and the effects. So they were covering up the blood and reducing the pain and all of that. But nobody was examining the tumor. So that's what we were doing. That's what the books are about, taking out the tumor and dissecting it.
You made so many fascinating comments. I want to circle back to the beginning. It's something you said. You said you started trying to treat the men before you started listening to them, and you said it just made things worse. What happened when you started with that first approach?
What we discovered was that the men were learning from each other.
Mm.
So if they were physically violent to their partners, they could transfer that to a mental control, and they would be equally in control, but they wouldn't be physically violent anymore. And so in this country, they weren't breaking any crimes, causing any criminal convictions. So the women actually didn't know how to handle these new guys. The men who were actually physically violent, it was still obvious,
Yeah.
but most of them actually learned a new way of controlling their partners.
So, yeah, let's unpack what you discovered, because you said it's like there's one playbook they're using. So what happens in the grooming of a person?
The initial thing is that you and I don't know, Kerry, if you have a family or anything, but if you're rearing kids, we all groom people,
Mm.
right? We find out which one is going to be emptying the dishwasher, and we don't ask the other one to do it. We just keep playing up on the one child. If we go into a new office to work, within an hour we will know the person to help us with the photocopying machine or tell us where the coffee cups are, and we'll ignore somebody else. So
You're right, we do. We type people, don't we?
absolutely, we're all quite skilled at finding people who will cooperate with us, make our lives a little bit easier. So grooming is a natural thing. What's difficult to accept with men in this situation, when it's an adult grooming another person, is that the intention is devious, that they're not just out to make everybody a little bit life easier. They're out to actually take advantage of the partner. And that's the piece of it that was somewhat hidden from us, and also something that was very difficult to accept, because most of the men we met are very pleasant individuals,
Mhm.
and they could talk really possibly better than some of us. Some of them were very successful in their own businesses and in their own careers. They were professional men, and we felt a bit daunted by them in a way. And it was quite hard for us to keep focusing on the idea that all these guys are very, very cynical and very malevolent in what they're doing at home.
So could you distill down to what their ultimate goal was?
It became very clear. As a matter of fact, I was only asked about this yesterday by somebody from the States. I was asked, what did I think of I don't know if you're familiar with the wheel that the Duluth people, Ellen Pence, she produced it back in the 90s, I think, or late 80s. And I said, yeah, the only thing that's missing in that wheel, I said, is the steel rim that should contain it, I said, because that's sexual abuse.
Yeah, if you're thinking of the wheel, power and control wheel, is that what you're thinking of? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So
you make a statement I thought was like, just it rocked me. But when I read it in the book, which I love this book, but when I read it in the book, it suddenly was like to me a puzzle piece slipping into place. And you
right,
talk about near the middle and the back end about they're looking for sexual entitlement, the privilege of sexual
yeah.
access to somebody or to women in general. But I thought, oh, she's you're right. That's what all of this is about. Is that this is what?
All of this, and the older I get, now I'm nearly 80, but the older I get, the more I realize that all the other behaviors, all the things that are written about and castigated and condemned in other people's books, all of that stuff is just a smokescreen. What they're really about is sexual dominance in the relationship. And
Mm,
all their other behaviors is just to lead you astray or to get women to think differently. And what I find anyway is it's so difficult to get women to open up about what goes on in the bedroom.
yeah.
They don't want to talk about it because they're shamed or they're uncertain that it might be all their own fault or whatever other reason. So these guys, they hide behind all the other activities, the physical violence, which I'm now beginning to think is directly in proportion to the amount of resistance that they meet. So if a woman is compliant, there's no physical resistance, there's no physical violence. But if she's not compliant, if she's saying, I'm not doing that anymore, then the physical violence will reemerge. And the other parts of that is that when women are trying to explain why they're so upset or why they're so heartbroken or why they're so unsure of who they are themselves, they never mention their sexual experiences. They all talk about the other things, the fear and the lack of money or the tension in the house or anything else. But to get them to talk about what goes on in the bedroom is impossible almost.
Yeah, but you talk about why, and you're right. You nailed it. I mean, I'm a woman. I've been living this life, and that is because from the moment we are almost like we're born, our
Mhm.
sexuality is interpreted. Everything that happens around us, everything that's um, occurs to us, is then turned in as an interpretation about us.
That's right.
So as a result, if I'm not interested in intimacy, then somehow I'm frigid or I'm a tease. It's
A-
always flipped. So it's a reflection of my failure instead of seen as a dynamic happening between me and the other person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all the responsibility comes back onto the woman if the relationship is unsuccessful in any way. I say right at the beginning of that book that she gets full responsibility for the emotional temperature of the relationship.
Yeah.
It's all her fault whether it's working or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what you're essentially saying, let me back up and say it again because I think this is so powerful, It's not that the guy is ashamed. It's not that the guy is insecure. It's not that he just loves to have power. It's about he's trying to protect his sexual dominance. That's what you think is going on in these abusive relationships.
That's all that's happening. And
Mhm.
what really makes my hair fall out, and you can see a lot of it's after falling out already, is to find most of the literature today are discussing why men are narcissists.
Yes.
And it's the buzzword. And actually, a narcissist is quite a harmless individual. He just loves himself, which these men do as well, but that's another smokescreen. They're not really thinking.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Looking for a home that keeps you connected to Silicon Valley without the usual barriers to entry? The Gates in Morgan Hill by City Ventures is a walkable neighborhood near downtown restaurants, outdoor trails, and an easy commute to the Bay Area. It's a small town setting with access to major career hubs. Every home is all electric with buyer-owned solar included. With limited availability, now's the time to take a closer look. Discover your new home at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
About themselves, except where it comes to sexual gratification. And they want to guarantee themselves that their partner will be available when and if they need to have sexual gratification. That's all they're interested in.
Wow. How did that affect you when you realized that? I mean, especially as a man, what was, I would love to know what your reaction was.
Well, my reaction was relief because as a young man, I was studying to be a priest in the Catholic Church, and I was severely abused on a number of occasions by other men. And that left me kind of puzzled about what a man was or what a man should be. And it took me quite some time to realize that these guys were all the same. They were all operating from the same principle, which is their gratification was what they were entitled to. And it didn't matter how hurt or how damaged the person, the target person would be. They just saw it as their right to have their own sex needs gratified.
So then you make another big, huge conclusion in the book, and that is we're looking in the wrong direction when we talk about victim and victimology, that we really should be talking about male entitlement.
I'm just looking at you now, Kerry, and I'm saying to myself, first of all, there's something Irish about you. Well, partly because of your name, but to think that every woman who's being abused in this world today, and in Ireland, there are about 25% of relationships are abusive. Could be even higher, but there are definitely 25%. And it has nothing to do with the women.
Mm.
Some women,
wish you could scream that. Seriously.
no, it has nothing to do with them.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's how clever men are. That's how devious these guys are. They put all the responsibility back on the woman.
Yeah. In fact, there was a research study that came out of France, and I don't know what year, but it's recent. It's pretty new. And that was looking at autistic women, autistic girls and women. And they found that 9 out of 10 autistic women were sexually assaulted before the age of 18. 9 out of 10.
Hmm.
I was just, I cried. I cried
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because
It's,
we're talking that's nearly universal. When there's a more vulnerable population, it's nearly universal. They're being, and the majority of these women were under 15.
yeah, that's the kind of world we're living in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's probably been this way for the last 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Women are always seen as less than. Women are always seen as being subservient to a man. Certainly the church that I used to belong to was very much in favor of men's rights, conjugal rights. My mother died in 1998, and she believed that it was the duty of any wife to be available to their husbands whenever he requested it, which meant that just after the war in Ireland, when we were all very poor, my mother had 5 children within 3 years.
Mm.
She two twins. The other thing is my sister is a twin, and I realized on reflection at how the world treated her so differently than I got treated. So it's been going on a long time. Women are second class. And there is a book, and I won't think of the name of the author now quite recently, but she talks about empathy,
Mm.
HIM, empathy. And she says that's what's rife in the world today. There's some difficulty in a relationship, and our immediate position is to be groomed by the man into feeling sorry for him, irrespective of what he's doing to his partner.
Yeah, yeah. So talk about how it happens culturally and what you think we need to do to shift that to put the focus back on where because you spend up most of the back half of this book of how he gets into her head trying to identify how we can change and it isn't just simply to stop the abuse we need a cultural change.
We need a cultural change, which, and I regret to have to say this, but I think the only people who will create that change are men,
Yeah, I do too.
and men are shirking the job. They won't do it. They're quite happy if their own particular circumstances are going okay. They don't want to engage with anybody else. They don't want to challenge other men who are abusive. And the only other way to change that is to change it in the law, where that we have a new law in Ireland. We're not sure how to use it yet, but it's called coercive control, and that has been criminalized. It's been taken out of family law and it's been put into the criminal courts. And some men have been prosecuted under coercive control. The difficulty at the moment is that it's still the whole process relies on the target woman to produce the evidence, and women aren't skilled at doing that yet. But maybe with some effort, the women will begin to collate the evidence and produce the evidence, and then the sanctions will be appropriate. But the biggest problem I think we feel, from what I can see now, and I'm not very familiar with Facebook or any of these things, I'm not on them, but I'm sure they're there, is that the new generation of men growing up are being almost encouraged to be misogynistic
Mm.
and to look for their own rights, and that women are there to be used. And there are several very prominent people certainly in this part of the world who actually say those things quite clearly and openly on social media. And that's the big danger now. These boys are growing up in families where their father mistreats their mother, and they will think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and you can see it here too. It's prevalent, the idea of that. I mean, the push to release Jeff Epstein's files and the resistance to that. Why?
Yeah.
Because it will reveal powerful men who've been involved and they don't want that revelation. So it's yeah, or even the P. Diddy trial, how he
Mm,
basically walked away with not hardly any of the charges. And why?
that's true.
Because Cassie looked like she loved him, which well, she was scared of him and she probably did love him but somehow that changed the perspective and made it look like it wasn't as bad as it really was. Yeah, we just I see a lot of victims walk into court and they're already behind the 8 ball. As a woman, when you walk into court and you say he abused me, that there's the assumption, and I love to talk about this, that there's an assumption of full autonomy and full agency, like both partners have full control over themselves and their choices. But that's not actually what happens in these relationships.
No, you're right. The belief is that it takes two to tango, so
Mm,
everybody is equally responsible. But nobody has actually brought the legal system to learn. Nobody's tried to teach them. I tried to teach them here, and they wouldn't even allow me back into the colleges. Um,
mm,
because nobody knows or nobody is prepared to accept that what men do at the beginning completely unbalances the whole process.
Yeah.
And without appearing to do anything in the first year or two of the relationship, they can control a woman's mind without actually ever being physically abusive or without actually while appearing to love her almost and while charming her. But they've already gained access to her thinking and they use that then against her subsequently. And she finds that difficult to explain because she didn't know it happened in the first place. So
Exactly.
if she goes to
Exactly.
court, she can't explain it.
Yeah, yeah, I took your brainwashing scale at the back of that second relationship that I was in, and he, just to give you perspective, never physically touched me, never called me a bad name, didn't even scream at me, but I rated, mind control with terror.
That's
Yeah, I was
crucial. Good.
terrified of him, and what he did was he used very subtle withdrawals. He would emotionally
Yes.
disappear on me and punish me if I didn't comply exactly the way he wanted. He let me know right at the beginning it was his way only and that I would lose the relationship if I didn't go along.
Hmm. Hmm. And that should be your loss. I mean, to say
Yes. Yes.
that 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 you would suffer the consequences of it, and that like so you were being stupid if you didn't go along.
Yeah, he'd even let me know that he would say things like, "You're making such a big deal that he had a phrase. He'd say, "Why do you have to turn everything into a storm in a teacup?" He'd love to say that, "A storm in a teacup." I'm like, "No, it's my feelings or it's what's happening between us. Are you gonna let it ruin the day?" "Yeah, maybe. Maybe I do wanna," it was he was very good. He established it right off. I mean, immediately like by the second date, he was already implementing strategies in there to let me here. Well, first we have to set it up. Like, why would I care? Well, he presented as the perfect person. I'd never met anybody that I felt so matched with. So I was really invested.
Yeah, he had to present himself as the perfect person because only then would you open up to him. Only then would you reveal who you really were, how your inner world worked, and that's the information he needed.
Yeah.
So one of the things that it would be very clear at the beginning of any relationship, these men told us that they would first of all, within a half hour of meeting somebody, they would assess whether they were kind or not. So if you were a bitch, which is what we call them here, ladies who only thought about themselves or who were high maintenance, they would touch you. So you had to be kind. And the second most important thing is you had to be truthful. So you didn't dress up your own life. You told them what was happening for you, your dreams and your anxieties and your previous experiences and all of that. Bit by bit, you didn't have to tell them all in the one day, but you began to speak like that about yourself. And that's what fed his information. That's what gave him control over your mind.
Yeah, I concluded at the end when I stood back and looked at the whole thing from a psychological perspective, I realized I never knew him. I have no idea who he is. And I was in a relationship and married to him for 2 years and knew him for 3. I never knew him.
Right, right. Yeah, that's the really sad thing because I'm not sure how far psychology has gone, but when I looked up psychology 20 years ago and gave up on it, I realized that there was very few discussions about evil people,
Yeah.
but that's what they are. These guys are evil. They spend. I remember Scott Peck. He's probably before your time,
No, I've
but
read his book.
he read The People of the Lie,
Mhm.
and
Excellent
in
book.
that book, he said that he wasn't sure about evil people. He said one thing he realized was that he worked in the prisons in the East Coast, and he said that the evil people are not in the prisons. There are some people who've done very evil things, but they're not evil people. He said the evil people are out wearing the best of suits and the best of shoes and parading themselves around. And how he would describe evil is somebody who gets out of bed every morning with the intention of undermining another human being.
Yes, yes.
That's what's going on. That's how they think. It comes kind of easy to them, but that's what they spend their whole day doing. You become their project, and they want to make sure that they are infiltrating your thoughts and manipulating how you react.
Yes. I watched him groom a young nurse who was taking care of his mother, who happened to be living with us because of needing surgery, pretty significant surgery. So we were in another country, and we had a young nurse come in to do the care for her. And I watched him start to slowly work on her, to get her to trust him, to tell him things, to confide. He'd rescue her in the rain and go pick her up so she didn't have to take the taxi. These little subtle moves. And then when things broke apart and we weren't in the area and he moved away, she texted him. I caught the text, and she said, "What happened? Why are you not talking to me? Why are you not?" I mean, I was thankful for her because I know it saved her. But
Mhm.
I could see the emotional connection he had built with her, that she was grieving the loss of the connection.
Yeah.
He called it hunting. He was hunting.
Yeah, that's what they are. They're predators. Yeah. But as most predators, you need to be very subtle. You can't just run up and jump on somebody. You have to make sure that they don't run away. You have to make sure that when you're being abusive, that they blame themselves for it.
Yeah.
And you can increase the abuse bit by bit then until such time as you gain complete dominance and the person that you're targeting has no idea how it happened or what happened even, but they certainly feel it.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up this interview and jump over to the podcast extra, which is where I want to talk about the steps to grooming. So actually, let's break it down and talk about how someone gets into another person's head. But if somebody wants to learn more about your work, where can they go to find out about you or your work?
Well, I'm not sure anymore because I published the first book and I think it's still available in certainly in Amazon bookshops and stuff. Um, but the other two books, my publisher went broke, so
Mm.
there doesn't seem to be a lot of those copies left anymore. But if anybody's interested, I'm writing another book called "We Need to Talk About Him." And it's written about him rather than about her or us. And I hope that'll be published sometime in the future.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't have a
thrilled.
I don't have a publisher yet, but maybe before I die. I mean, my kids keep telling me I'm 80. I should be reading the paper and watching horse racing or something. I, I need to get this out of my chest first.
No, I'm thrilled. I know how he gets into her head is on Amazon. I know that. And I will make sure that I think I even got a library copy, because at the top it's in this casing and it says family
Right.
at the top. So I think
All
this
right.
was a resell from a library. But anyway, it is available on Amazon. I'll make sure to put the link. I'll also make sure to include your other books. I don't know. I have not tried to purchase them, but I know you have 3 books actually, right?
That's right.
3 books, and I'm thrilled to hear you're working on a 4th. I'm just yeah. Yay! That's good news. Very, very good
That's,
news.
that's the first bit of encouragement I've gotten. So thank you for that, Kerry.
So, we're gonna hop over to the podcast extra and talk about how grooming happens. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Kerry.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? You can find me at Kerry McAvoy, PhD. Or you can learn about me and more about my resources, such as the Toxic Free Relationship Club, at kerrymcavoyphd.com. If you found this episode helpful, please do me a favor and leave me a 5-star review. And I'll see you back here next week.
That was Dr. Kerry McAvoy and Don Hennessy, and I hope that conversation landed the way it did for me. There's something powerful about hearing directly from someone who has spent his career inside the mind of the abuser. It validates so much of what survivors already sense, but can't always articulate. Thank you to Kerry for letting me to share this with you. If this episode resonated, go find Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse wherever you listen to podcasts and give Kerry a follow while you're there. And as always, if you are seeing these patterns clearly now, but still feel stuck in the same cycle, that's not a knowledge problem, that's a support problem. And if you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join in my coaching program. You can learn more at covertnarcissism.com. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin to move forward. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. Your story matters, and you deserve to be heard without judgment. Check out my coaching services at my website, again, covertnarcissism.com. And don't forget to subscribe, to thumbs up, to follow, to like this podcast so that you can get more empowering episodes like this one, and to help us continue spreading the word so that our community can continue to grow. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those she has talked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support any allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of this material and information provided.
If you've been dreaming about a place where life feels a little more intentional, discover the Canopy in Sebastopol by City Ventures. This new community offers solar-powered homes, surrounded by mature trees, nature preserves, and walking trails, with a vibrant local downtown, renowned wineries, and the Bay Area all within easy reach. Enjoy low-maintenance living, refined design, and built-in eco-friendly features that make everyday life easier. Start your next chapter at the Canopy by City Ventures. Visit cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.